to my new video, poem A Legend of the Northland from the Beehive book Class 9. Phoebe Cary, she was an American poet and she has written this poem, A Legend of the Northland. She, along with a younger sister, poet Alice Cary, co-published poems in 1849 and then each went on to publish volumes of her own. After the deaths in 1871, joint anthologies of the sisters' unpublished poems were also compiled. A Legend of the Northland is a ballad. You would all like to know what a ballad is. Ballad is actually a poem narrating a story in short stanzas. In total, we find here in this poem, there are 16 stanzas and these stanzas will tell us a story. Ballads are also a part of the folk culture and they are passed on orally from one generation to the next. This story is that of the Northland area, the area which is near the North Pole. This exact place is not specified, but Northland means the area in the northernmost part of the earth, that is, near the North Pole. The word legend means an historical story, one which is very old and has been passed on from one generation to the next. Let us go to the reading and explanation of the poem stanza by stanza. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. The poet may also state in this region around the North Pole, the duration of the day is very less because its position is such that the sun's rays reach for a very less time. When this area is experiencing winter season, the duration of night is very long and the daytime hours are very less. In line number 4, they refers to the people who live in this region. The poet also wants to say that when the people go to bed, take a few hours of sleep and then they wake up, it is still night. He wants to emphasize on the fact that the duration of the night is very long. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. The explanation of this stanza is that this Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. It is a snowy area. The reindeer is an animal which is found in this polar region. People tie the reindeers to the sledges and then these reindeers pull the sled. He adds that the children look like young ones of a bear because they wear the funny looking clothes made of fur which is very like the furry skin of a bear. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. In line number 1, the word they refers to the parents or the elders and them refers to the children or the younger ones. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the younger ones. The poet says that she doesn't think that the story is true. But if she could tell the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. The story gives an important message. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, The story is about Saint Peter. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around giving religious lectures to the people, just like all saints do, then an incident happened. He came to the door of a cottage and traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. When Saint Peter was moving around the world, giving religious lectures to the people, he reached the door of a cottage where a small woman was making cakes. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. As Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and feeling weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes and he asked for one cake out of the many cakes that she had baked. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. The woman was quite selfish. She did not give the cake from her store. Instead, she started making a very small cake for Saint Peter. She did not want to share her things, but when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that this cake was too big to be given to someone. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. The little miser woman thought that this cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at that cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she was not ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. The third time she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. She rolled it and made it into a thin wafer-like structure. But she was so greedy that she couldn't even give that thin piece of wafer to the saint. For she said, "My cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away." So she put them on the shelf. The woman reasoned that when she ate the cakes, she felt that they were very small. But if she had to give them to someone, she felt that they were too big to be given away. She put all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen and she did not give any cake to Saint Peter. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Saint Peter became very angry. He was very hungry, feeling weak, and this selfish woman, she was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm." Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. He added that God had given her food, shelter, and fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish for all the resources she had. She did not want to share them with anybody. "Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood." Saint Peter cursed this woman that hence she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. She shall become a bird, and just like birds build in houses by boring into the wood, and she would collect very little food by working hard the entire day. Similarly, she would also work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a woodpecker. Saint Peter's curse had converted the woman into a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same. But all the rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal in the flame. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red-colored cap on her head. This cap was there on the bird's head also, but the woman's remaining clothes had all got burned and turned black in color, just like coal. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood. where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. People who live in the countryside, even the small children who go to school, have seen this kind of bird in the woods. They say that she stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with a beak to collect her food. Whenever any child gets this kind of bird, then his elders tell him the story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy, and so she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird. They get a teaching that they should not be greedy. Yes, I hope you all have heard and understood the explanation of the poem. And this poem teaches us a very important lesson. The lesson is that we should not be greedy. Rather, we should be generous, kind-natured, and share with the others whatever things we possess. Thank you.